It's the latest in the Mackie ProFX series of boards. This is the ProFX10 Go. And while at first glance you might think this is a V3 with a battery slapped on the back, well, you're pretty much right, but there are a few things to delight and surprise you here. And as usual, we're going to start out with the build quality. Starting out with the chassis, I'm happy to report this thing is as much of a tank as previous Mackies. In fact, I don't know if it's the power supply rejig, but this thing feels heavier. Now, a quick Google search and I was right, it does have an extra pound on it. Still though, it's only 5.9 pounds if you care about that. Now, the whole chassis is steel except for the sides, which are ABS plastic, meaning they are tough as well. The knobs and the buttons are, as you would expect, they're quite good and everything feels as it should. Now, my last Mackie was the ProFX10 V2, so these mute buttons are very new to me, and I have to say they're very tactile and they feel fantastic. The meters on the board are also fantastic, and this board does also have the effects screen from the V3 Plus series. On the older models, you just have the FX with no real way of customizing it. You'd have multiple effects like delay, but if you really wanted to hone that in, you were kind of SOL. This is very much a welcome change for me, though if you're familiar with the V3 Plus series, you know what I'm talking about. We're going to go over those options in a bit when we dive into the effects. But first, onto that battery. Now, this thing is bigger than I thought, but it's also rather reassuring in size. I found the 8-hour estimate for battery life was pretty accurate, though I have a feeling if you're putting a heavy load on this thing, you might find that number drop a bit. However, it is super easy to get out, and you can even charge it via USB-C, which is pretty sweet if you have more than one. And as so, this should come as no surprise to you, but the specs don't exactly change here either. This is a ProFX V3 Plus series through and through. 60 dB of gain on the Onyx preamps, meaning if you want to run an SM7B with this board, you will need a gain booster. Perhaps one of the few instances where an SM7DB would actually come in handy. You have a resolution of 24-bit and 192 kilohertz, and an EIN of neg 126, which is rather respectable for a mixer like this. And I guess now is probably the best time to bring up some of the bonuses this board has to offer. 3 recording modes that you can select right on the board. You have standard, loopback, and just straight up interface. You get the 3-knob EQ, 1-knob compression, Bluetooth both ways, meaning you can actually run a call through the board, which does have mix minus already baked in. And of course, you have those GigFX that we're talking about. Now, speaking of those, let's take a look at them. So let's take a look at what we've got here. So I've got it on delay and reverb, and you can use this knob to kind of find your way around all the settings on here, and the back button to go and change the effects you want. Let's start with the delay and reverb. I'm not going to be doing a whole bunch of kind of going through these effects and really kind of hammering them out. I just wanted to give you an idea of what you do have and what you can do with it. So something like delay and reverb, obviously you can go through, not a touch screen apparently, but you can just go through and you can actually test out which ones you want to change, like the size of it. You can bring that down to make it a little less imposing. However, the effects knob down here, actually you can't see me, let me bring this up here. The effects knob here, you just turn it down a little bit if you want less effects on it. Sorry, Lars. So yeah, lots of ways to really change this up, all the way down to the EQ of it, where you can get into the frequency, the width, and the gain on the EQ. It's really cool how much you can change this stuff up. And obviously, utilizing the knob for the amount is a good idea. So if you want to work your way through, let's back up, and we're just going to work our way through delay and chorus. The delay is pretty good. Of course, we'll turn this down a little bit so we can have a little bit more control. So yeah, like going through, I've already set this up a little bit with messing with the time and the feedback. You can bring the feedback up a little bit. and the high cut. But you can also go with the delay. You can go into the EQ of things and really figure out what frequency you want, which is kind of cool. So if you want to get the higher frequencies delaying rather than the lower frequencies, so and then we move on, we'll go back to echo is basically what you think it is. I set this up to have like high feedback and time, so don't mind me. Let's not go through all those right now. Hall reverb is exactly what you think it's going to be. Ooh, there we go. A little smoother. And you can also move over to plate. Oh, I missed one. Room reverb. And then, of course, plate reverb, which I like for voice. But it also sounds good on a guitar. Okay, and moving on. 2 choruses, and you got a flanger. I've never been good at using chorus or flanger, so then we're back to the delay and reverb, which is kind of my favorite. So if there's anything more you guys want to see about the GigFX, let me know. I'll see if there's enough interest in doing actually a little bit more of a video and putting stuff together and all that. Same goes for the rest of the board, like things I didn't mention with the USB 3.4 override. So you can actually, you know, play along with stuff. And anyways, if you want to see more on that, let me know. I'll see if there's enough interest and I can do another video with it. Okay, let's start with the positive here. This is a really cool board that may look at first as being rather niche, but when you start to think about your use case, it might start to sound pretty good. Dodgy power options wherever you're going. I've run sound at many events that have had very suspect power supply issues. This is one less plug in your fire hazard of a daisy chain. Also, though, we are getting more and more mobile in every respect these days. Are you jamming at a rental space that charges you through the roof for recordings of the jam session? Problem solved. Perhaps you're looking for ways to be able to interview someone in a coffee shop without any power options. Here you go. In reality, if you're doing anything outside the comfort of your studio, this might be a handy little piece of gear. Now, along with those pros, I do have to mention the battery as well. I mean, this is a battery-powered Mackie mixer with all the bells and whistles. And the battery's replaceable. I'm not going to open up that can of worms again, but come on, that's cool, no? Okay then, let's move on to the cons. And I have to be clear, they're not really cons. Both are more of a wish than anything else. Now, while I do love the battery and all that, there's no way of actually seeing how much juice is left in the battery, which might lead to some anxiety when you're doing a longer gig, or perhaps you didn't get to plug it in as long as you wanted. The power light on the unit flashes green when it's charging, solid green when it's charged, and it does go orangish when low, but that's about it. It's not really a massive hang-up, but I can see that biting someone in the ass at some point. And lastly, I wish the effects were addressable. Again, not really a con, as I really do love how they've been upgraded, as I mentioned earlier. But as it is right now, you have either your effects on all channels or not at all. Whatever effects you have selected, those are the effects available for every channel. So if you want only delay for a guitar and only reverb for Vox, well, too bad. It would be one of those creature comforts that would make this an extremely attractive option and would just further the usefulness of those effects. Now, what puts that firmly into a wish category is that I can imagine having multiple effects buses may not do well for the overall affordability of the board or the overall ability of that battery. So should you buy it? Now, if you're in the market for a decent little board for your studio and perhaps once in a while going out of the studio, yeah, this thing's pretty sweet. Again, though, that battery is something that does impact the price of the unit. You have to keep that in mind, but it is also a fair uptick in price, all things considered. And again, It's a Mackie, doing all the things you loved Mackie doing, but this time doing it with battery backup. It's a pretty sweet little option for running small gigs and having the peace of mind for power supply. So if that's your Huckleberry, this thing is actually pretty fun. I do have some plans using this thing with my new 4-track reel-to-reel. Stay tuned for that. Otherwise, if you want to check this out, I do have some links in the comments that go a long way to supporting the channel. Cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.